Hi, Lyssa deHart here today, and I want to talk to you about a question that came up on the YouTube channel from one of the viewers. And the question was roughly, how do you end a coaching conversation when you get to the end of it and the client still has not reached his or her outcome that they were looking for, and you are kind of meandering around at the end of the conversation, wondering how to close it, and you may be extending your time in order to try and get them to a goal or a stated purpose for the conversation. And they didn't feel that this was sustainable. So thank you to Ice Candy 281. Thank you for the question, and I appreciate it. So anybody else who has questions, please drop them in below, and I will possibly do a video to answer that question. So first, I want to say I absolutely agree with you that there is very little sustainability if what you have is a 30-minute or a 1-hour session that you're doing with clients, and then you're passing over your end time because it may be running into your next time, number one. So it may be a situation in which you don't have enough space for yourself between sessions, or you've got another session right on the heels of the first session, and you're like now going into your next session feeling really stressed out and panicked. So that's not sustainable for the long term. I think the other thing is, as you get busier, you're going to have more clients, and so therefore you're going to have less time. I think another reason it's really important to learn how to end conversations is because you have to take care of yourself when you're a coach, or anybody working with other people. There are boundaries that are really important to create with people so that you have time to recalibrate and I don't know, recalibrate's the best word that's coming up to my mind right now, where you can take a breath and you can maybe get some water, or you can refresh your tea or coffee, or you can walk in circles around your house or do something to really take care of yourself so that you are prepared for the next conversation that you're going to have with somebody. And so I agree with you. Going over a session time more than once or twice, it does happen occasionally, but doing it on a regular basis with somebody is a big indicator that you've got to manage your time a little bit better. But saying that, some of the reasons that we end up in the situation, and who hasn't ended up in the situation? I know I have. There's certainly been many times where I'm like, all right, I guess we're going to go over a few minutes because something is really coming up for that client. So I get it. And I also think that it's an indicator, even in myself, of not having a really strong agreement in place about what is important to the client to have or uncover during the conversation. And I think there's a couple of reasons why this happens. The first reason that I think or the first reason I think this happens is that in our agreement setting, the coaches come into the conversation and said to the client something to the effect of, what's your topic for today? And the client has said, my topic is X. And the coach has gone, great, we're going to work on X. And what would be different at the end of the conversation when we've explored X? And the client says something to the effect of, I would have tools. Something has just happened in this conversation for the coach at any rate, and that's typically, I think I understand what's important to the client because they told me their topic, and we're moving towards tools. And so coaches can get pretty linear then in the way that they're asking questions, because now they're driving their clients towards a solution that looks like tools. The problem with this is that the client comes to the conversation with a topic, but the topic isn't necessarily what's important to them. And so if you spend most of your session talking and driving and solving the client towards tools, you're going to miss this amazing opportunity to get to what's below the waterline, on the iceberg, below the iceberg waterline, as to what's even driving this topic as being important to the client today. And as a result of that, what happens is the coach may be doing a lot of leading and pushing and solving towards something that really wasn't what was important to the client to begin with. So having a thorough agreement setting where what we're doing is we're also finding out like, hey, here's your topic X. What's important about topic X for you? When you think about topic X, and what is it that you're noticing is your experience of topic X? I'm feeling like it's like I'm wrestling with alligators or something. Okay, great. So if we were to move from wrestling with alligators, what are we moving towards in this conversation? Where would you like to be in relationship to this conversation by the end of it? And the client will say something to the effect of maybe like, I would have more insight, or I'd have more ease, or I'd have clarity. Clarity often comes up for people as a direction that they want to be heading towards. So now we have this wrestling with alligators, this deeper thing that's going on. And it's not just about X, it's about the relationship to X. And so when we do that, it gives us an arc of the coaching conversation. So when conversations go long, it's often because we've been spiraling around the mulberry bush and we haven't really gotten to this deeper issue, this wrestling with alligators. And so it eventually comes up, but like at the very end of the conversation, instead of at the very beginning of the conversation, where the coach then has all this time to explore it with the client, which is why it's so crucial to remember that agreement setting, is coaching, but it also is the thing that sets up the container, right? It sets one of the bookends very firmly, and it creates a link towards the second bookend, which is around facilitating client growth. So then this really brings us to our second bookend, which is facilitating client growth. And in this particular scenario, when we're working with a client and we see that, let's say we're working with them for an hour, we see that we've got about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes left in the conversation. The coach is going to have to do a little multitasking in the sense of time awareness. I see that we have 10 to 15 minutes left in the conversation. There's a place of being really transparent with the client. I want to check in. I noticed that we have about 10 to 15 minutes left in this conversation, and I'm curious, is there something that is still important for us to really explore that would be helpful in moving towards, remember, they said clarity or awareness or insight, right? So we use their language that would really support you in having more clarity around this situation X. And the client will say yes or no, right? Whatever they say. So if they have another insight, what have you learned about yourself as a result of this conversation that we've had today? What the coach is going to want to start to do is now start to facilitate the client's awareness and growth. So we're going to be wanting to anchor their learning. What have you learned, not just about the situation, but also about yourself in the situation? What are you going to do? Like, what actions will support this awareness that you've just had about this insight that you have had in this conversation that we've just had? What might get in the way of you following through on these actions that you're developing right now for yourself that support your insight and awareness? And then there's a piece where, like, what value or character strength do you have that would support you in following through on taking these actions that you say are important to you? In this way, what we're starting to do is we're really starting to anchor the client's agreement around what it is their actions are going to be and their accountability is going to be, and how they're going to move forward between now and the next session. And so in that way, we're holding that container. And as a result of that, we're setting the parameters for the client to be done then in that 10 to 15 minutes of the conversation. Mind you, it doesn't always work perfectly, like I just explained it. And sometimes you have a client who is like, they're very thoughtful and they're an internal processor, and it may take them longer to get to those awarenesses or insights, or they may need to process the information with a bit more just with more time. I have a client who I'd been working with in 30-minute sessions, and we kept going over time. And I said to them, that maybe time, like, can we reassess the time that we're spending together? Because I'm noticing that consistently we're going over time by about 10 minutes. And I'm thinking that maybe you just need a bit more time because you're a thoughtful internal processor. And I don't know that the 30-minute sessions are really working for you as well as maybe a longer session would work for you, because it seems like we're starting to really get somewhere that's important to you at about the 25-minute mark. And then there's just no time, because it's like, hey, we have 5 minutes left. How do you want to wrap this up? And so we renegotiated the length of time of the coaching conversations. So that's one thing to consider. I think another thing to consider is that I'm not doing a very good job of managing the expectations or the time. I think I could be working on being more clear. Hey, I'm noticing, we're about 5 minutes from the end of this 30-minute session, and I'm really looking at what do we need to really explore to wrap up as we come to a close, so that I'm setting the expectation that we're not going to be talking for another 15 to 20 minutes. And so that's on me as the coach. I think another thing that's on me as the coach is when it is this idea of the client hasn't gotten what it is that they are supposed to have gotten from the conversation, who am I to determine what it is that they're supposed to have gotten? I think it's a place for what would you like to play with between now and our next session? Where is the place that you want to really explore? Has something shown up in this conversation today where you might want to like noodle around on this for the next week or two before we meet again? We can always hand it back to the client for them to do something with it between now and the next session. Coaching doesn't always occur in the 30-minute or 1 hour or 2 hour or however many hour coaching session that you do. Coaching often happens between the thoughtful conversation that we had here and then the thoughtful conversation that we're going to have over here. It's what happens in the gap between the two, where the client is still processing what it is that their awarenesses and insights have been. And I think it's really important too, then, that as we're looking at this, how are we really exploring and evoking awareness and really listening deeply to our clients so that they get insight or awareness? I often talk about the metaphor of, if trees are falling in a forest and nobody is there to hear them, do they make a sound? And I think oftentimes with clients in conversations, trees are falling everywhere. We've got trees all over the place, but the coach is so busy considering their next question that what they do is they miss hearing those trees falling. And so I think the other thing that can happen that leads to conversations going long is that the client hasn't really had an opportunity to explore their insights. We've been so busy trying to solve a problem and come up with a solution or a tool for them that we've missed these beautiful opportunities to explore more deeply. And so in saying that, as you look at the overarching coaching conversation, it's a place for us to really begin to look at things like, how are we managing our time? Is the amount of time that we have scheduled for this coaching conversation reasonable for the person that we're talking to? If we've got an external processor who knows what they want to talk about and is ready to get going immediately out of the gate, 30 minutes might be a perfect coaching amount of time. If we have somebody who's a very thoughtful, insightful, deep processing, internal processor, 30 minutes may not be fair to them. We need to have that conversation with our clients. The third thing is, are we really setting a full enough agreement and really getting to what's important early enough in the conversation so that the client can actually be doing the deeper work through the conversation and not needing to do it in the last 5 minutes? That's on us also. We're in charge of the questions that we ask. We're not in charge of the responses that the client has, but we are in charge of the questions that we have. And I think the fourth thing is really, how do we really anchor it at the very end so that the client is walking away with some sort of awareness of themselves in the situation and coming up with the actions that are most going to support them. It doesn't have to be a final conversation. We are not really aligned or responsible for packaging up a perfectly wrapped present to give to the client at the end of a conversation. It can be messy. It doesn't always end with a giant aha. Sometimes clients will even say things like, I already know this, I just had to put it together in this scenario. Exactly. That's brilliant. Now that you've put it together in this scenario, what do you want to do about that? And so the client comes up with the actions, and the action may be, I just need to sit with this for another couple of weeks, and I'm maybe going to journal about it, or I'm maybe going to just take walks and think about it, or I'm going to do nothing with it, and I'm just going to observe and see how it comes up over and over again, or whatever it is that the client comes up with. And the coach is really just anchoring them into a place of how do you forward the action from the awareness and insights that they gained from the coaching conversation. So thank you for being here today. I hope that you enjoyed this little video. I hope it was useful for you. Please remember to like, subscribe, hit the notifications. When new videos come up, you'll be notified. And I am attaching a couple of videos that I think may be very useful. One of them has to do with You Are the Coaching Tool, and the second one is around You Are the Coaching Tool is the first one. So the second one is really, how do you start to bottom line yourself as a coach? And so I hope those two videos are useful to you. Cheers.